to the Small Business Show, where you get to hear the journey, find the challenge, and create solutions. I'm your host, Lori Brooks, and I thank you so much for joining me today. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Today's guest is a powerhouse who turned grit, hustle, and a spreadsheet into an empire. Natalia Zacharin is the founder and CEO of Zacharin Consulting, a boutique accounting and fractional CFO firm recently ranked 25th on the Inc. Regionals list. She went from single mom to sales rep managing a 22 million in territory to teaching herself accounting on YouTube and launching her own firm. Today, Natalia helps business owners move from financial chaos to clarity with expert bookkeeping and forecasting and CFO level strategy that fuels real scalable growth. If you've outgrown DIY bookkeeping, if you're feeling overwhelmed by your numbers, or if you just know it's time to start running your business like a CEO, this is the conversation you've been waiting for.
Natalia, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. I'm excited to really dive into your journey as an entrepreneur and your practice. But before we get there, I want to rewind the clock just a bit. I want to go back to, say, the days of, junior high or high school. Think about a time when an aunt or an uncle or a mentor even would have asked you what it is you want to be when you grow up. What was your answer to that question back then?
Oh, back then, I wanted to be an engineer back then.
Ooh.
And the reason being, it seemed like all of the men in my family, not all of them, but a good majority of the men in my family, my cousins, uncles, my father, they were all engineers. And I wanted to be the first female engineer. That was kind of my dream without knowing what it was to be an engineer. So like when I went into school for engineering, I was like, oh no, that's not for me.
I love that. I love how the influences of family and friends and those that we see around us growing up, that community really kind of shapes what it is we think we want to be when we grow up. I always find that amusing. My father was actually a mechanic. And so growing up, I always, I would love working on cars with my dad and doing this and that, learning how to do an oil change or changing the tire and things of that sort. And then when I became, old enough to really start thinking career paths, and I was looking at it like, no, that's not for me either. There were so many other things that I thought of way back when, but it's funny how that shapes the journey. So you thought you were going to be an engineer. You saw all of those in your community who were engineers. You started off in school on that path. What was it that made you recognize, no, there's a pivot coming in my journey?
I think it was walking into the classroom. So I got through all the math, which makes sense because I'm an accountant now. So I got through all the math. And when I started on the path of the physics and thermodynamics, I was like, I would go into the classroom and I'd feel like I had never been in that class before. And I had never missed a lesson. So I didn't miss anything. I was reading, I was doing all the homework, and I'm like, how do these people, I would look around and be like, how does everybody know what's going on? I have no idea what's going on. So I figured it was such a struggle for me to understand it that I was thinking, I don't think I'm going to make a good engineer because I don't understand the concepts.
Right. I totally follow that. When you just have that moment of clarity and you kind of recognize this maybe isn't really designed for my path. So once you recognize that and you realize, okay, there's some sort of, incongruency in this journey, what were those next steps for you in terms of making that pivot? How did you go about taking those first steps? And what do you feel like really helped you do that?
So I pivoted several times in my life. I really, the way I looked at it was college for me. So I went to school. College for me at a certain point was just get a degree to show that you have a commitment to something. And so I did. I got a degree in Russian area studies. Back then, that was in the late 1980s, early when I was in school, early 1990s. It was right before the wall came down. My family is from Russia, and I spoke Russian fluently. So it was just kind of a natural thing to go into. I was an American citizen. I speak Russian. Why don't I go work for the government and
Hmm.
be like a spy or something for the United States government? So that was like my next step. But it never came to fruition. I got out of school. I went to my first job. From that job, I went to another job. I got a job like from people that I knew, or I applied to different jobs. And then I decided at some point I was bored with where I lived. So I moved across the country at 24 years old by myself. Without my parents really didn't want me to. And I was like, I'm done, I'm bored. And that kind of just the journey at that point wasn't really a career journey, it was more of a finding myself and figuring out a path. And it's really interesting looking at it from that point to where I am today, is everything that I did led me to where I am now in some way, shape, or form, or I learned something. I was pretty relentless about figuring things out, and I was pretty fearless. I felt fear. Actually always thought that I was very fearful. But looking back, I was like, who moves across the country at 24 years old? Like I shipped my car. My parents weren't home. They came home and I was gone. Got myself a ticket. Didn't have a job. Didn't have a place to stay. Stayed at a family friend's house for 2 weeks until I got a job, got my car, got an apartment, and I lived on my own. And at 24 years old. And I think now I look back, I'm like, wow, that was pretty brave.
Hmm.
Yeah.
No, that was super brave. And that's part of the reason why I love doing this part of the show is just kind of looking back at that journey, figuring out what those nuggets were that kind of contributed to where we are today. Because there's so many of them. I think that's so amazing that you had the courage and the strength, the clarity, and the organization at 24 to
Yeah.
actually like get yourself to organize all of it and ship yourself across the country. Kudos to you. And yes, that is like clearly the making of an entrepreneurial journey in the beginning. So I'd
Yes.
love to know. You're now the founder and CEO of Zacharin Consulting. Congratulations.
Thank
So
you.
share with us what those steps were of really deciding to found a company. What were those hiccups in the beginning when you did move out of out of your parents' house across the country? Of course, there were many pivots along the way, but what were
Yeah.
those first initial steps? And what do you feel like were the hiccups that led to you making the pivot to founding your own consulting firm?
Right. I think that early on, I started learning, like still within my 20s and maybe my 30s, I was starting to learn that I wanted to make as much money as possible for the hours that I was working. And
Mhm.
so I worked for a company for a couple of years. And when I started looking at other positions, and there were a lot of positions available that were similar or that I felt that had experience for
Mhm.
a lot more money, I went to my boss and I said, I don't feel like I'm making enough for what I do, and this is what I do.
Mhm.
And like you have to, if you ever do that, you have to have backup of like, this is
Mhm.
what I was hired for, and this is what I do that's in excess of that, and this is what else I can bring to the table. What can you do? What can you do for me for all of that? Like I can do
Mhm.
all of this for you. What can you do? And she did not have a good answer, so I left. And I went to another company, and right away my salary jumped pretty significantly. I think it was around 8 or 10 grand
Mhm.
in a salary and that's a pretty significant jump, especially back then.
Mhm.
So, or at least I felt it was. And then I worked, one of my favorite jobs was when I worked as a sales rep. And I think that is a skill that is so
Mhm.
important for entrepreneurship. So I landed, eventually I moved to Maryland. That's where I live now. I lived in Houston, Texas before for a little while, and then I moved to Maryland, and I got a job being a buyer at a purchasing agent at a
Mhm.
food service company. And so I would work with the sales reps that would sell to us. And one
Mhm.
of my sales reps that worked for Reynolds wrap aluminum foil, he said to me, by the way, I'm getting promoted and the position is open. I think that you'd be great. And I'd never had a
Mhm.
sales position before. And so without any experience, Reynolds hires me for a multi-million-dollar sales position. And I think it was at $15 million that I was in charge of. But by the time I left, I had a $22 million territory. So I was there. Yeah. And sales was just like, I figured out it was my thing. I did the opposite of what all my competition did. So they'd go and play golf on Fridays and only focus on the big guys. I did the opposite. I worked on Fridays and I made sure everybody saw me, even the small clients. And I was extremely honest. And that really got me far. Fast forward to right before I started Zacharin Consulting. So I had been working again for another company for several years. And at this point, I'm already a lot older. I'm a single mom. And I'm seeing that I'm not able to move up in the company or move into other directions in the company the way I want to. And I actually, they were making a lot of changes and transitions, and my salary got reduced significantly. I think they were trying to make a lot of changes and get some people to leave. So I was looking for other work. I couldn't find anything, and I was sitting in a cafe. So I don't have a normal entrepreneurial story. I didn't want to be an entrepreneur. I kind of fell into it. So I'm sitting at the cafe with my then boyfriend, who says to me, "Why don't you start your own business?" And I said, "Doing what?" And he said, "Accounting." And I was like, that's kind of funny because I was an invoicing clerk. So before that, I was in sales, and then I was an invoicing clerk. I had no idea what accounting even really was. And I was like, sounds good. So I started, he sent me like this little, this worksheet. It was like an 8-week course on how to start your own business that he said that he had used, and he sent that to me. So I was like, still thinking I'll go through the course, but maybe it'll be a really good way for me to learn more sales skills because I'm eventually going to just work for someone. So I was going through the course at night, on weekends, at nighttime, at lunchtime, like whenever I had time as a single mom and working full time. And suddenly, I run through this marketing section of the course that says, excuse me, connect to all these people on LinkedIn. And I connect to these people on LinkedIn, and I send out an email, that if you need help with your bookkeeping for your business, we're here to help. And someone called me. And I landed my first client very unexpectedly and not knowing how to do accounting. So you have to have a lot of integrity to do that. You can't charge people for your own self-development or your own learning. So I lost a tremendous amount of money my first year of just learning and figuring things out and learning pricing. And doing a lot of stuff for free, and a lot that happens to a lot of entrepreneurs. But I basically taught myself accounting on YouTube. I happen to be pretty good about it because I understand numbers. There goes my engineering background. And suddenly I'm doing some like bookkeeping on the side for a bunch of clients. And that's kind of how it started.
That's awesome. I love when the serendipity of life just kind of throws entrepreneurship your direction. I love that it was something where you were kind of like, huh?
Yeah.
Whatever, let's try it. I love that because sometimes that's how the journey starts. It's, you recognize that this isn't working, this isn't working, this isn't working. And it's not that you necessarily are seeking out an entrepreneurial journey, but it evolves into one. And that's what it sounds like really truly occurred. You had the assistance of the extra course. And again, I think networking, your journey speaks to the power of networking. Having those people in your corner who can pull you into projects or provide you with a bit of clarity or structure or strategy in different areas is so important and spoke volumes in your journey as to, the opportunities that were provided, the structure and clarity that you gained through the network. So please share with us about Zacharin Consulting. Share with us, okay, for those who have no idea what a fractional CFO is.
Yes.
Let's start there. What is a fractional CFO and how do you serve your clients now?
Yes. So don't get scared about the fact that I taught myself because I'm actually very good at it, but also I now have a team of 12 and I employ 4 CPAs as well. So what does a fractional CFO do? So every single business needs to understand the numbers of their business, their profit, their revenue, their payroll costs, their expenses, if they have any loans, if they have assets, like all those things are really important for a business owner to understand. That's basically bookkeeping, right? Bookkeeping is not data entry. Bookkeeping is the foundational piece of your business for clarity, understanding. A lot of people just use it for compliance, but it's really that is your window to what is happening in your business. That's how your business is basically communicating with you. The fractional CFO piece takes that another step further and into the future. So bookkeeping is most recent historical data. Fractional CFO is now that we know this, and this is what happened, and these have been the trends. This is where we are today. Where do we want to go tomorrow or in a year? And how do we get there? And so it's projections, how to get there, what is impacted. So if you're at, let's say, $1 million in revenue and you want to make it to $2 million in revenue by the end of the year, how to plan that out with taking into consideration seasonality. What is impacted by that? Do you have to hire more people? Do you have to buy more product? Do you have to gain more skills? Do you have to offer another service? Like, what does that actually look like? And then meet the fractional CFO. We meet with you every single month. We look at what's been projected, what actually happened, and the variance, and we talk it through. And it helps you to micro correct and make changes before things start turning in the wrong direction. Because in finance, it's trend. It's not where you are right now, it's where you're headed. So it gives you an opportunity to have like almost like a seeing eyeglass into the future of, if I do this right now and it keeps going this direction, oh no, I'm going to run out of money in 6 months. So it avoids that pitfall and gives you options and opportunity to make changes in advance.
I love that. Applying the strategy to the actual numbers, not just playing around with them, doing the bookkeeping, but applying the actual strategy to create the scalable growth. That's beautiful. So I love what it is that you're doing. So for a business owner who is, say, DIY bookkeeping at this point, what are the signs that you would indicate they've outgrown that season of their practice?
Yeah. I think about it in two ways. So when I started my entrepreneurial journey, what I was taught, and mind you, I took a lot of advice and guidance from books, from other entrepreneurs, from groups. I joined a mastermind very early on before I could really truly afford it. And people told me, I just did it because I didn't know any better. I was like, okay, that sounds good. I don't know, because I didn't know how to run a business at the time. And every time I tried to do it my way, running a business is very counterintuitive. So when I tried to do it good way, it didn't work, especially sales, because sales is so psychological. So now I forgot what your question was. To wrap around to the question.
That's okay. It's kind of, what are those signs for someone who's doing DIY bookkeeping that they would need to now start calling Zacharin Consulting and working with you? What are those signs?
Exactly. So the reason why I said all of that was because what I was taught, and I truly, truly believe this, that when you are an entrepreneur, you need a lot of bandwidth and time in order to run your business. And so there are a lot of things in your life that are not necessary for you to be a successful business owner. Now, if you want to just have like a lifestyle business, that's totally fine. And that may be a little bit different. But if you really want to build and scale, you need to make room for that. Part of that is to make room and not do the things that are not part of your skill set. So you started your business because you have a specific skill set. And to do a lot of the other things doesn't always make sense, especially when you might be doing it incorrectly. You don't know, because again, bookkeeping is not data entry, and it's not. There's a lot of AI in bookkeeping, but it's not good yet. It's actually pretty incorrect, and we see some awful financials that come to us by the time we have clients. So there's a risk, right? There's a risk you're not doing it correctly, and you're also taking time. It's not. I would not consider hiring someone an expense. I consider that an investment in your time, an investment to make sure things are accurate. Like I know how to clean my house. The first thing I did when I started my journey, and I didn't even have money really to do so, the first thing I did was I hired someone to clean my house. It doesn't make sense for me to clean my house in the 4 hours that it takes to do so when I could close a client that can make me 60,000 in a year. Doesn't make
Right,
sense anymore.
right.
So start thinking about what makes sense for your time. And usually
Yeah.
that is building revenue.
Woman after my own heart. It's one of my favorite strategies that I discuss is the 4D
Yeah.
strategy. Really, delete, delegate, delay, or dominate. That's how you're going to grow,
Yes.
creating time in your schedule. And that's only going to happen when you do one of those things, really looking at if I could close a client in these next 4 hours that's going to make me X, Y, and Z, is it worth me spending that time cleaning the house or doing the laundry or whatever else those tasks might be? Take them off your plate, one of which is bookkeeping, because Zacharin
Yes.
Consulting could definitely be handling that for you
Yes.
if you are looking to grow at this
Yes.
point. So,
Yes, and we will grow with you. So there are a lot of bookkeepers out there right now that don't have a lot of skills,
mhm,
or they're starting their own business, which I'm not going to poo-poo that because I started my own business and I didn't know a lot either.
mhm,
However, you do want someone that has a lot of experience and
yeah,
expertise, especially if
mhm,
you want to grow and scale.
mhm,
And what we do is we don't just do the bookkeeping; we do the bookkeeping with an eye for what should it reflect in the financials, and then we have an in-house controller. We have an in-house CPA that reviews everything for technical accuracy. That might not sound important to someone right now, but when someone makes a mistake and forgets to add an asset correctly into your balance sheet, which is actually a little bit more complicated than most
mhm.
people can do bookkeeping, that could severely impact what you owe in taxes.
Definitely. No,
Mhm.
definitely. Making sure that things are accurate is
Yes,
more than important when it comes to your financials, whether it be for personal or for business. So, no, I think what you're doing is outstanding. I love the fact that you are assisting entrepreneurs in this journey of
yes,
growth because that's what people need. Entrepreneurs out here need someone to guide them through this journey strategically in some way, shape,
they
or
do.
form. So, I
They do.
love that you're creating this.
Thank
I'm
you.
curious, if you had the ability to say, go back in time
Mhm.
10, 15 years and tell yourself just one thing before you started Zacharin Consulting, before you even thought about entrepreneurship, before it became a part of your language, if you could have told yourself just one thing, what do you think that would have
Oh, I think it would have been, girl, you're smart.
been?
Stop listening to all these other people that are making you feel like you're dumb. I would say, girl, you are smart, you are hardworking, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And I think I listened to people way too much. I was very
Mm,
shy. I probably had, my self-esteem wasn't always the best. I went into a really bad marriage, which validated my self-esteem feelings of not feeling great and made it even like 1,000% worse. I don't
mhm,
regret any of those decisions because it really built me up to who I am today. I have some grit. I have real grit now. But I would tell that young me, don't worry, you're going to figure it out and you're smart. And anybody that insults you or offends you, it's really a reflection on how they feel about themselves more than anything else.
definitely, 100%. I love that. You got to listen to your gut. Trust
Yes,
yourself. Take
I
all the
do.
noise out of it and trust your gut because that's what's going to lead the journey in the direction that it definitely needs to go. So, thank you for that. The show's really designed to assist entrepreneurs with coming up with an idea for a business and an industry that they may not have been thinking of before they started watching this episode. So, I'm curious, as a fractional CFO, if you had a magic wand and could just change anything at all in your industry, what do you feel like that would be and why?
In my industry, I think I would definitely change the fact that a lot of people go into the industry and the industry it's a very conservative industry
Hmm.
um, that is wrought with bad client experience and
Hmm.
poor customer service because a lot of accountants and bookkeepers and CPAs don't know how to run a business. They're not
Mm,
CFOs. So I
mhm,
learned to be a CFO. The first thing I did was because I did all of my own sales and I spoke to hundreds, if not thousands, of entrepreneurs over and over and
mhm,
over again. And the story always was, I want to know how to grow and scale. I want to know how to have more profit. I want to know
Hmm.
how to build wealth. I want to know how to have more cash in the bank. So all of those skills, I was like, well, that's what's necessary. So that's when we started the CFO, the fractional CFO practice. A lot of other offices, especially in my industry, don't understand how to run a business. So what
Hmm.
they do is they are overworked, they undercharge, they can't do the work efficiently or accurately, and they can't give the client enough attention that they need, and they definitely can't give a lot of advice. So I would say if I had a magic wand, I'd say that every single person that wants to become an accountant needs to also understand how to become a CFO. Um,
Hmm.
because you have to understand how to run a business in order to do the financials for a business. It is a completely different ball game
Hmm.
when you do
Hmm.
that.
No, definitely. I agree. Mapping in business ownership knowledge just as a foundational piece into training for becoming an
Yeah.
accountant would be a phenomenal change to the industry. So thank you for that thought process. I
Yes.
appreciate it.
And
So,
I would actually say that that's a good example for every single person starting their own business.
mm,
Charge what you need to charge with the knowledge. You're not charging for your experience, you're charging for the scope of work. Don't
mhm.
worry about your competition, and always remember, think about yourself as you are now and where you want to be in 10 to 20 years. And have that thought process of like who's going to be working for you, where are you going to be at? Like, are you going to be a $10 million company by then? You might be. Normalize those numbers and then engineer that backwards to where you are today and start with that type of mindset of charging appropriately, because otherwise you're going to get burned out.
100%, definitely. Charging appropriately because the journey has the propensity to burn you out regardless. So
Yes.
making sure that the financials are set in the background will allow for that to be, the burnout to be a little less crazy when it does occur. So, no, excellent, excellent, excellent. Natalia, you have been outstanding. I thank you so much for joining me today. Please share the best way for our viewers to find you.
Yes. So the best way to find us is actually um, under www.zacharинconsulting.com/Lori Brooks, all one word. So that way it's very easy to find us. And you'll find the podcast episode. And we have a couple giveaways on that page. We have the 7 ways to find money in your business now, and then a checklist for the ultimate financially successful business on that page.
That is outstanding. I'm so excited. And I thank you so much. So, audience, please be sure to go visit the page, grab those freebies that are over there for you. Natalia, you are outstanding. I thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was very
Of
nice.
course.
Thank you.